talk about generally economics and particularly Atmanirbhar economics, because this is where I began my understanding of not only theoretical economics as it is applied in India, and also how India, with its 1/6 of global population on a 2% land area, can handle the world and handle itself. It was during the euphoric globalization, which hit us like a tsunami, which hit the whole world like a tsunami and completely changed the world upside down. Because till then, as you are aware, it is the Cold War, which was at times open also, which was dictating global relationship, global trade, global economics, global finance, global interface. It was all decided on ideology. So the ideological foundations collapsed in 1990s, as you all know, and the West proclaimed that it has won against the rest and it is best for the rest to follow the West. That became the foundation of globalization. In fact, Francis Fukuyama wrote that free market economics and liberal democracy has won against all other philosophies, ideologies. So with this, when globalization became the mantra or the future, I was a corporate advisor and I could not fathom its impact, because I have been in the corporate field in economics and trade and commerce and finance for almost 15 to 20 years by the time. But I could not come across one industrialist, one industry association, one policy maker understanding what this strange animal of globalization would do. So there was no understanding anywhere except what was being dished out by the media outside, and of course many lobbying institutions and persons. So I started traveling across the country to understand what our country is. There must be something in this country which has sustained it for thousands of years. And then I understood that there is something far more hidden than we know about this country. When I went to Ludhiana, Batala, Rajkot, Jamnagar, Morbi, right down to Thoothukudi, for 7-8 years, I traveled across the country to understand the economic, technological, business and commercial potentials of India. I was astounded by first that we actually did not know about India. I used to ask this question in IIT and IIM, which is the place with the highest per capita income in India. I used to tell them it's not Bombay, it's not Delhi, it's not Bangalore, it's not Calcutta, it's not Chennai. No one knew. It is a small place called Morbi in Gujarat. And the one language which they were not familiar with was English. Wherever I had gone, it is people who had no knowledge of English, who were entrepreneurs, who were building up production, who were manufacturing, who were exporting. It unveiled a different India before me. And when I began explaining that the country can stand only on the strength of the people who take risks and do business, and not by people who invest. Even people who invest will have to find people who will take risks to business. And when I said that Indian entrepreneurship should be the foundation for India's economic growth, technological growth, whatever you call it, I was called a Neanderthal economist. That I am taking the country backward. So much so that Jagdish Bhagwati was rated as who was branded as the god of free trade. He said in a press conference, if Mr. Gurumurthy is an economist, I can be called a Bharatanatyam dancer. This was the extent to which the idea of Atmanirbhar, which we were expounding in a big way, and almost carrying on in intellectual warfare and swimming against the current at the time, we were being trashed. But today, everyone agrees in 25 years, the idea of globalization is dead. And no one needs to say this other than the very spearhead of globalization called the Economist magazine, which proclaimed in 2019 that globalization is dead. And the whole world order has changed. And the man who made it, Henry Kissinger, he said the world order will change forever. He said it will change forever from what is clear into what was never clear. It is not clear even today. But if anything has delivered a final message, according to me, it is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It has brought back the Cold War. Once Cold War is there is nothing called globalization, and it is only to be cremated hereafter. So we have to now have an intellectual, economic, trade, technological foundation for Atmanirbhar Bharat. Atmanirbhar Bharat is not an idea alien to India. It is integral to India. You know, if you look at the Encyclopedia Britannica, which after having trashed India for hundreds of years, has come to the conclusion if there is any civilization which has a continuity, even in physical icons, from the days of Indus Valley civilization till today, it is India. In spite of all the vicissitudes, 1,000 years of attacks, slavery, India has maintained a continuity which seems to be denied to all other civilizations. What has made India like this, and why this intellectual confusion is an area of my study, experience, empirical research, which I would like to share. What is Atmanirbhar? I would like to put it in 4 simple concepts. Think ourselves, know ourselves, be ourselves, do ourselves. If you don't think ourselves, you cannot know ourselves. If we do not know ourselves, we cannot be ourselves. If we cannot be ourselves, we cannot do ourselves. I will demonstrate to you how it works. You know, this idea that we should be ourselves is an ancient Indian concept. In fact, the Mundaka Upanishad says, Isava Pantaha. You decide this is the route and move. It is not that you get confused. Anobaddaha Kritoyantu Vishwataha. You must get ideas from all over the world. As Mahatma Gandhi said, you should not be swept away. He quoted this and said that we must have our own idea for this purpose. And I will put it why we did not think ourselves. We outsourced our thinking. Karl Marx said in 1853 in an article which he wrote in the International Herald Tribune, was previously called as a different Tribune, in which he said that India is some kind of a socialist country, but this is a country which worships monkeys and cows, and it is a semi-barbaric society. And he dismissed our mode of production as Asiatic method of production, and this dominated the Indian thinking. And then came Max Weber, who said Hinduism and Buddhism will ensure that we don't qualify for development because we believe in karma and rebirth. These were the ideas that governed the Indian academia, Indian policy making, Indian public discourse. The whole thing turned in 1983 when Paul Biro came with his research that India is the only country which from 1750 to 1900, he was mandated to do that research by the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, and he said that India is the only country which led the world with the 25% of world GDP. And then the West did not accept it, and they asked Angus Madison to do a 2,000-year research. And he came to the conclusion for 1700 years, India was the leader of the world. And in 1750, the combined GDP of England and America put together was just 2%. And that rose to 42%, 41% in 1900. So all this meant we did not know ourselves. We dismissed ourselves as unqualified and disqualified for development. We believed in sociologists and not historians. I would just like to quote 2 historians who said, Will Durant, 1935. He said, if there is any country in the world, any civilization which can save the world, it is India. And Arnold Toynbee, 1970, he said it is already becoming clear that a chapter which had Western beginnings will have to have an Indian ending if it is not to end in the self-destruction of the human race. We believed in the sociologists who were short-termists and who said India will not develop. And we dismissed the historians who said, yes, India is the hope for the world. So we did not know about ourselves. And there is so much of researches today to show how India had developed in a manner, whether it is in the concept of republic or local administration or drainage or plumbing or even passport. In Arthashastra, from moving from one place to the other, identity card was used. And microwave to dockyard to the invention of pie, the Bodhayana Sutra, and plastic surgery to cataract. All these were kept out. All these are now coming out as the Indian discoveries. I am only citing maybe a few examples out of a few hundred that has been accepted as the Indian achievements in the past. This is not in our textbooks. This is not in our public discourse. It is not in the media. So we did not know about ourselves and be ourselves. This is the most critical aspect. You know, when India became free, even the need for an army was questioned. This is the disclosure. The enemy had to teach us that we need an army. Why it happened? It happened because of the confusion created by the Kalinga War. In Kalinga War, Ashoka's state of mind was the same as Arjuna's state of mind before the Kurukshetra War. Arjuna was crying before the Kurukshetra War, I will be killing people, I will be maiming people, I will be widowing women, I will be orphaning children. And Ashoka said all this after the war. And Krishna removed all his confusion through the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, one of my researches is why Krishna gave freedom of action to Arjuna in the 18th chapter and not in the first chapter. He told him, he said, now I have taught you everything. Now I am giving you freedom of action. If you want to wage war, you wage. Otherwise, you give up war. Why didn't he tell him in the first chapter? Because he found Arjuna was so confused, he would not be able to take a decision. So that clarity which Arjuna got from Krishna was not available to Ashoka. And Victor Ashoka gave up the war, but he did not disband the army, but he was projected as some kind of a Buddha. And we followed what is known as non-violence, as if it is some kind of a sannyasa dharma to be followed by the society as a whole. And, you know, we were humiliated. We learned the need for war only by the courtesy of our enemies. So we were not ourselves. It is only in 1998, when 74 partially, 98, that we acquired the will to power. When we exploded the Pokhran atom bomb, and of course, I can say all that happened at the time, because of lack of time, I'm not saying it. So the Kurukshetra psyche came to India only after the Pokhran explosion of 1998, and we overcame the Kalinga psyche, which is a very important part of Indians' understanding about our security. Do ourselves. You see, unless we think ourselves, know ourselves, be ourselves, we cannot do ourselves. The latest example is the Indradhanush, this vaccination effort of India. Do you mean to say that India ever could have thought of producing a vaccine in the past? We always imported the vaccine 3 years, 4 years, 5 years after it was invented and used and made available free everywhere. And that's how we were getting. If we had not done the Indradhanush, our doing it ourselves, India would have been nowhere. We would not have found ourselves hope to come out of this. So do ourselves. So this capacity, it is born out of the conviction and self-confidence. This is what was destroyed by the colonial regime, and the new regime which came also did not build this confidence. Now everyone knows that India has the will to power now, and it influences the global course of events, that it is nobody's baby, that it will not take a call because somebody wants it to take a call. It will take a call in its own interest. These are all manifestations of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Previously, it is escaping something. Today, it is not. So now we have two critical issues. Security is the most important area. I know the security was originally limited to defense, but it is expanding meaning. It is now defense production and technology, food security, technology, particularly communication, economic security, all these are mutually dependent. Nothing can be excluded from one another and said this is important, that's not important, because today it is no more guns which are fighting, it is technology which is fighting. Second is there should be strategic partnerships. You can never fight a war. No country is going to fight another country's war, and no country can fight a war alone. Every country needs strategic partnerships. It may be technology, it may be commerce, it may be trade, it may be finance, it may be even arms. So there has to be a cluster. When we think of Atmanirbharta, we must also think about reliable friendships. So this is also integral to Atmanirbharta. And geopolitics and geoeconomics are so intertwined today that we need to forge economic relationship and strategic political and defense partnerships also. And this will constitute the Atmanirbharta in the contemporary context. And finally, I will conclude that we have a problem. We are not like other societies who easily have a them versus approach. Them versus us has been driving the world for the last 2000 years. But we are completely different. The Maha Upanishad says, I am Bandhura, I am Net, Ganana Laguchetasam, Utara Chitanam Vasudaiva Kutumbagam, Pitara Chitanantu Vasudaiva Kutumbagam. This means this, that someone is mine, the other is not, is the thinking of small-minded people. For those who have a large heart, the entire world is one family. This is largely believed by the entire philosophic foundation of India. But we are facing ideologies, we are facing people, we are facing nations which deny this concept, which say we and you. So we have what is known as Karl Popper said in 1945, we have a paradox of tolerance. Our tolerance itself becomes a problem. Our tolerance becomes a limitation. He says when tolerance is put to test by intolerance, and if the tolerance over tolerates the intolerance, tolerance will cease to exist. This is the problem of India. And unless we have a very clear way of handling this paradox of tolerance, Popper's paradox of tolerance, we will not be able to even identify who the enemy is. Because otherwise the entire world is our friend. And if Ukraine voted against India, there are people who say we should support Ukraine because somebody is doing wrong to Ukraine. It is not that, they have also some reciprocal obligation to us. Any country which we have to support must also have a sense of non-enmity to us, if not friendliness. So this intellectual confusion, which is born out of the spiritual, philosophic drive of India, is something which we have to understand, and it is also working in the reverse. And we are called intolerant, actually. We are over tolerant. Because of that, we are suffering. This is what Karl Popper says. But we are said, no, you are intolerant because you are not tolerating the intolerant. Huge problem. So the Atmanirbharta of India, which has a 5,000-year history, it is not yesterday's phenomenon. It is a continuing phenomenon. As Swami Vivekananda said, if you want to look at which is the surviving civilization of India, in spite of all the vicissitudes, if you go to Rome, it is spider weaves its web where the Caesars rule. This is what Swamiji says. If you want to know what is Egyptian civilization, you have to look at the broken pyramids. No one knows where Babylonian civilization is. But we have a continuity. And our tolerance, our idea there is no them versus us, the world is one, is our strength. And that's our weakness also. So we need an intellectual foundation to overcome this enormous amount of conflict which will arise in the modern world because of the them versus us philosophy, ideologies which are ruling the world. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts.